Okay, so now we're going to jump into the bulk of the work in this CSS file sheet, and let's get started on our wireframe. So the first tag we're going to want to play around with here is going to be our header tag and our wrapper tag. Those are the first two tags we encounter in our HTML. We'll kind of just work our way down. So let's create a new CSS rule for this wrap. So we'll come down in here. I'm going to say pound wrap. It's an ID. Remember, IDs in CSS are with the pound sign. So I've got that pound wrap, and let's just set up a little bit of base code inside of here. I'm going to set this to say max dash width equal to 1040 pixels. In other words, this wrapper tag won't ever be bigger than 1040 pixels wide. So I'm essentially setting a maximum width of 1040. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to set this to margin 0 auto. You'll recall from the CSS tutorials what this does is it's going to center our wrapper tag at in the middle of the viewport. Okay, so we'll just set that. That's not going to show any major change on here. See, I refresh this, and I still can't see anything, but that's all we need to do to the wrapper tag. The next tag we encounter is the header tag up here. So let's do a new CSS rule right below this. I like to roughly keep my CSS in line with the HTML. So the same order that the tags appear inside of here is roughly the same order I'll try to maintain through my CSS sheet. There's a lot of rules or not a lot of rules, but there's a lot of schools of thought on ways to maintain CSS sheets and different ways to organize them. And really, you kind of come up with your own personalized method. But for now, we're just going to stick to that simple method. So for this header tag, it's pound header. That's the ID of that particular header. And we're going to give this guy a height. And so we're going to say height. And I actually don't know what the height is, so I'll just put a couple question marks for right now. And we're going to set this position to relative. The reason we're setting this position to relative is we're going to use some absolute positioning to move our logo over to the left side and move our nav over to the right. So the height of my header tag needs to be the height of this right here. So I'm actually going to zoom in here, and I'm going to turn off the slices because it's snapping to them. So I'll say view show slices, get rid of those. And I need to measure the distance between the top of my mockup to the very top of, or the very bottom of the header. You can use the Photoshop ruler tool to measure. I prefer just grabbing the rectangular marquee and just quickly dragging out a marquee because it shows me right there that the height is 150. And you'll remember from the design file, we did design it like that on purpose. So we'll come back over here and we're going to set height equal to 150 pixels. Whoops. Pixels. And while we're doing our wireframing, we're going to give everything big, bright background colors. We're going to delete these in the end, but this will just help us to see how this is coming together. So I'll just give that a color of red. I'll save and come back here and refresh now. And looks like that's not updating, so maybe the issue, yep, I have not saved my HTML yet, so remember that, save the HTML, come back here, then refresh. And there's the header section of my site, and you'll notice that it's automatically centered because my wrapper tag is centering everything in the site via this margin 0 auto. So I'm going to zoom in now a little bit tighter on this CSS, and now that we kind of have that reset out of the way, I'll hit return a few times to kind of push that out because we can kind of ignore it from here on out and just focus on the CSS. Okay, so we have our wrapper, we have our header, and let's lay out just a couple more of these tags. So let's jump over to our Photoshop mockup. The next tag we encounter, we're going to ignore these middle tags for now, but the next thing is this big giant main one right here. So if we go back and look at our HTML, that is the tag. Whoops. We've done the header, so we just did this one. Now we're on this div ID equals main. So we'll come back here and let's create this main tag here. And for our main, we're just going to do the same thing. We'll give it a big bright background color, and we'll just make this. I just like to pick random colors when I'm doing this. So we'll give it a background color of orange. And we want this thing to have a width let's see, we're actually going to need to measure that width from Photoshop. So the width of this is going to be from the outside edge. Whoops, those slices popped back up. Dang those things. Turn those back off. So the width is going to be from there all the way to the outer edge right there, which is 1040. You'll remember from the grid, we set that up on purpose. So this is 1040. If you have a marquee active, you can come into the info and it'll tell you exactly the size of the marquee as well. So this is 1040. So width, 1040 pixels. We have our background color set, and let's give this thing a minimum height. And let's just set this to 300 pixels so that we can at least see it because it doesn't have any content yet. And let's save that, come in here and refresh. And so this is going to be the big main section of our website. Now, if you look at our mockup, it's got this slight shadow that we created all the way around this main section. So clear up to the top. This main section kind of has that, I guess I need to zoom out a little more, has that little shadow all the way around it, all the way down to the bottom. And we did that with a drop shadow in Photoshop. Now, it used to be really tricky to create shadows like this in the old way, I guess in the old school way of designing for the web. But with this advent of CSS3, it makes doing shadows like this really easy. So we'll just go ahead and add that at this point just to illustrate some of these CSS3 properties that we're going to be using. So the property is called box-shadow. And this property takes 3 values. I'm just going to do 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels. And then I'm going to say RGBA. And then I'll say 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, now I'll explain each of these. So the box shadow has a horizontal offset, a vertical offset. The third property here is the amount of blur. And the fourth property is the color. And this color I'm representing in what's known as RGBA syntax, which is red, green, blue, alpha. So this is red channel, this is the blue, green channel, this is the blue channel, and this is the amount of transparency, or the alpha channel. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this one to 0 because I don't want any horizontal offset. I don't want any vertical offset. I do want a bit of shadow or a bit of blur. So I'll set the blur to be 10 pixels. And the color I want is black. Now black is 0, 0, 0, or no red, no green, no blue, because we're on a monitor and we're on subtractive or additive color space. And then I'm going to set this to maybe 0.7. In other words, 70% transparency. So let's save that, jump back here and refresh. And you can see if I zoom in here exactly what that did. I guess I can't zoom in too tight. There we go. So you can see that little shadow that it created all the way around there. And if I was to crank that blur value, let's put this up to 50 just to illustrate this and refresh, it's going to really add a lot of blur. If I crank it down to 2 pixels, it'll barely be any blur. So that's what that value does. I like 10, I think is about right for this particular thing. So now we have that shadow. We have a few of these main divs selected, and we'll continue working through this in the next tutorial.